If you remember a next-gen follow-up to the Budokai Tenkaichi series with online multiplayer and new transformations, then you played Raging Blast. Or was it Sparking Zero? Because these two games have quite a lot in common, and in this video we're going to compare them, highlighting the similarities, differences, and changes between the two Budokai Tenkaichi successors. But first, let's take a moment to remind ourselves of where exactly the Raging Blast games sit in the Dragon Ball video game timeline. Released in 2009 and 10 respectively, the Raging Blast games were seen as a continuation of the Budokai Tenkaichi series, only this time for the HD generation of consoles. And yes, I will be comparing both Raging Blast 1 and 2 against Sparking Zero because, let's be honest, apart from a few new characters, maps, and a shiny visual overhaul, the second game doesn't really have that much new content. Alright, with that out of the way, let's begin by comparing the combat. Now, both games were built on the foundation of the Tenkaichi series, however Raging Blast was released only 2 years after Tenkaichi 3, so the developers felt the need to change things up a bit. The HUD is now contained to the circle in the bottom corner of the screen, meanwhile the super and ultimate attacks are now mapped onto the right analog stick instead of the combos. Raging Blast was also the first game in the series to introduce visual transformation and character swap shortcuts. This game would also introduce the ability to slam characters into the side of a wall and then beat them up a bit, and also had a little unique move mapped onto the circle button for each of the characters. Apart from that, Raging Blast retained most of the same gameplay from its predecessor. However, this game does feel a bit slower and less responsive than the Tenkaichi games, often resulting in repetitive combat or awkward angles which are further accented by the dodgy camera. And God help you if you get stuck next to a ledge or some kind of a cliff. Another new element is the opportunity to engage in this QuickTime sequence whenever you swap characters. This is an interesting feature in theory, however in reality it just takes too long and slows the pace of the battle down. And it's fine if you're playing against a friend because you can just agree not to use it, but for some reason the developers made it so that the CPU players activate it every time, and this feature would be present in both the games. And speaking of the second game, the camera and the flow of combat did see a slight improvement. Raging Blast 2 would also introduce a few new mechanics like the Raging Soul mode and the ability to deflect beam attacks. Now, Sparking Zero has 17 years of nostalgia behind it, so it leans a lot closer to the original Tenkaichi formula, which means we get the classic hub and the button-based combos. However, Sparking Zero does also borrow elements from Raging Blast, like the character and transformation shortcuts. The new game's combat does feel faster and more refined, and the game does a better job of letting you string together attacks without interruption. It's definitely a lot closer to the original PlayStation 2 games. Some players have had issues with the camera, but it is way better behaved than it was in Raging Blast. I will say I do prefer the classic analog spinning beam struggle used in Raging Blast, as opposed to whatever the hell they decided to do here. Another thing that Sparking Zero borrows from Raging Blast is its visual direction when it comes to ultimate attacks. In particular, the way the characters get enveloped by the key wave when they get hit. Here is a comparison. And while we're on the subject, let's talk about the visuals. Yes, both these games are HD, but they were released 14 years apart, so we're not exactly comparing apples to apples here. Raging Blast 1 is very similar to Tenkaichi 3 in its design and aesthetics. The characters still have that really bulky look about them. I mean, I've never seen such a thick neck Vegeta. For reference, this is what he was supposed to look like during the Saiyan saga. But this one doesn't really even have a neck, he's like Fred Flintstone. Yeah, gee, Kakarot, you've got some balls turning into Super Saiyan 3. Now, Raging Blast 2 kept the same character models but used a different shader. And I think it really depends on your personal preference, but to me, the models from the second game all look like they've been dipped in Johnson's baby oil. Now, Sparking Zero's characters look about as close as you can get to the anime. The game does a great job of capturing the dynamic feel of the show, transitioning seamlessly from combat to special moves. Again, I'm not going to harp on too much about this because in many ways games games like Budokai Tenkaichi and Raging Blast laid the foundation for Sparking Zero's visuals, and you can see that these two games still share quite a lot of their DNA, especially when it comes to the ultimate moves. Here are a few comparisons.
See you around.
The same thing is also true about the character transformations, and here are a few comparisons of that.
Feast your eyes!
Let the bloodbath commence!
This is the end for you!
Now, as you may have noticed from the last one, the Super Saiyan transformations have always been a bit awkward in Raging Blast. Why are their mouths so huge? And why aren't they making any noise? When constipation strikes, Dulcolax is here to help. Okay, now let's compare the character rosters. As we know, the Tenkaichi games were renowned for their huge rosters of characters and transformations, with the third game having over 160 characters and forms. The Raging Blast games don't quite match that, coming in at about 90 and 100 characters and forms respectively. The first game focused on the main roster from Z, while the second game expanded it to movie characters. And you know this is a true Tenkaichi game because it's got some obscure characters like Vegeta's brother, Nezu, Dore. Who the f***'s Dore? Dore the Explorer? The second game's big gimmick was also the inclusion of the remade Plan to Eradicate the Saiyans OVA, which itself was a companion to an old Famicom game. You see, this was still 3 years before the Battle of Gods movie, so the developers were desperate to find some new characters to include in the roster, which is how we got these two fan-favorite transformations, Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta and Broly, who looks like he plays mad bass in a hair metal band. However, GT characters and transformations are notably missing from both Raging Blast games, which is not the case in Sparking Zero. The new game's roster comes in at over 180 characters and transformations. Yes, it's by no means a complete roster. Tenkaichi staples such as Super 17, Pycon, and Tau are missing, but I'm pretty sure they'll make their way into the game eventually. Personally, I'm waiting for the Freddy Mercury DLC, but only after we get the Bido DLC so him and Deborah can fight over who's the best groomed villain in the series. Now, when it comes to maps, Raging Blast 1 launched with 10 stages, with 3 more being added in the sequel, and most of these maps have destructible elements. Now, Sparking Zero launched with 12 maps, which also have destructible elements in addition to day, evening, and night variants. Alright, now let's compare all the different game modes, starting with the story mode. So the first Raging Blast story isn't that different from what you'd get in Tenkaichi 1, but its presentation is what really sets it apart. Instead of your typical 2D menu, every battle has been beautifully rendered as this diorama still. And you can tell the developers took the effort to recreate many of the iconic panels and stills from the anime and manga. But when it comes to the content of the story mode, it is very similar to the Tenkaichi games, with characters standing and talking before battle. To be fair, some of the key moments, like Goku first transforming into Super Saiyan, have been given a bit more animation. Also, it did make for a nice change to have some of the battles be played from the villain's point of view. The story covers all of Z, along with a few fights from the Broly movies and the Bardock special. Now, usually the sequel would expand on the first game story, adding a few more movies or maybe even some GT sagas. But Raging Blast 2 decided to do away with the story mode completely in favor of the Galaxy mode. This mode has you pick a character and fight through a grid. Winning battles and meeting certain conditions will unlock new parts of the grid. Plus, all the various character grids have different degrees of connectivity, allowing allowing you to go back and unlock new paths depending on the conditions that you have met. Now, Sparking Zero has a traditional story mode, and just like the first Raging Blast game, it's also spread across a bunch of floating diorama-like objects, only this time they're centered on the locations instead of characters. The story mode itself still has its fair share of pre-battle dialogue, but this time the animation is way better. Plus, you can go into first-person view, allowing you to experience Deadbeat Father Simulator 2024. Many of the key elements are told through these 3D stills, which a few of the players have found disappointing, especially when compared to something like Kakarot. But this is still the most dynamic storytelling the Sparking series has seen to date. Now, both Raging Blast 1 and Sparking Zero have a What If mode. Raging Blast presents these in a series of standalone chapters, each with their own diorama. Sparking Zero uses the branching paths approach to introduce entire alternate reality mini-sagas, each with their own custom ending cutscene. Naturally, both games also have a tournament mode, but Raging Blast takes a slightly unusual approach towards it. Not only is it presented in this quirky 3D view, but you've got to have two people playing the tournament in every bracket. There is no CPU at all. Luckily, this was a feature that was fixed in the second game. Sparking Zero, on the other hand, lifts its tournament structure straight from Tenkaichi 3 with a bunch of different modes for you to enjoy. Likewise, both games also have a character gallery mode. Sparking Zero has a 3D viewer for each character accompanied by vocal commentary from the ladies. Raging Blast 1 doesn't have any commentary, but it presents plenty of character information in written form. You can also change costumes, do a bunch of different poses, and try different voice lines, which in Super Saiyan 3 Goku's example really paint him out to be a terrible person.
Sorry, but I have more important things to do than play games with you. Okay, what's this about?
So how does Raging Blast 2 build on this? Well, by taking away the 3D viewer altogether. Same for the character selection too. I'm guessing it had something to do with the new shader. An area that the Raging Blast games do shine in are the various single-player modes like Arcade, Survival, and Time Attack in the first game, and Battle Zone in the second game. In comparison, Sparking Zero only has the one custom battle mode. Both Raging Blast and Sparking Zero also have character customization systems, allowing you to upgrade skills and attributes along with visual customizations like outfits. However, Raging Blast does allow you to customize each character's super and ultimate movesets. And of course, both games have multiplayer. The Raging Blast games allowed for split screen across all maps. Meanwhile, officially, Sparking Zero currently only lets you do it in the hyperbolic time chamber. Apparently, this was due to the Xbox Series S not being able to handle it. But if you are playing on PC, there are already mods out there that can fix this. Both Raging Blast and Sparking Zero also have online play. Now, maybe it was the novelty of being one of the first Dragon Ball games with proper online, but pretty much everybody I've talked to said they had a great time playing those games online back in the day. As for Sparking Zero, the game is still very early in its life cycle. Personally, I have enjoyed the limited time I've spent online, but some players have expressed concern about it being unbalanced, causing the sweat to drive other players away, but I guess only time will tell. And so there we have it, Raging Blast compared to Sparking Zero. And whilst the Raging Blast games haven't gone on to have the same type of legacy as the Tenkaichi trilogy, it was nice to see Spike experiment with some interesting features, and ultimately you can see many of them have made their way into Sparking Zero. But that's just my take. Please let me know your thoughts on these games in the comments below. How well do you think the Raging Blast games have aged? Is there anything that you think they did better than Sparking Zero? And is it time to finally put Master Roshi in a home?
There are 3 gals on my right and 2 on my left. How many ladies are all around me?
As always, thanks for watching. Please consider supporting me on Patreon, and a big thanks to my existing patrons. If you've enjoyed this video, then please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.